Right now, at a multi-billion-dollar shipping port on the West Coast, there's this globally tracked, edge AI-monitored maritime container.
Right.
And it's just sitting completely idle on a concrete slab. I mean, the physical infrastructure around it is working perfectly, you know?
Yeah, the cranes are operational, the trucks are fueled.
Exactly. The drivers are literally on the clock. But the container itself isn't moving. And the reason why is just, well, it's wild.
It really is.
It's because a logistics manager sitting in some windowless back office, like 30 miles away, accidentally pasted row 4000 of a shipping manifest into row 4001 of a localized spreadsheet.
Yeah, one microscopic human error.
Right. And that single error just completely severs the digital chain of custody. So welcome to the deep dive. Today, we're looking right at you, the listener, to unpack this. We're calling it the trillion-dollar blind spot.
Which is exactly what it is. A massive systemic operational bottleneck that's, quietly crippling modern enterprises.
Yeah. Draining morale, bleeding capital. And to do this, we're pulling insights from a few really fascinating sources. We've got operational insights from Catalogent, who specialize in business transformation.
Right, and we're pairing that with research from Capsule CRM on how these invisible bottlenecks actually show up in everyday workflows.
But the anchor for all of this, and this is where it gets really interesting, is the deep tech operational philosophy of Prasad Bond.
Yeah, he's a systems architect. He builds 5G edge AI protocols for heavy industrial environments.
Which gives him this incredibly specific vantage point, right? Because we're taking his insights and applying Dieter Rams's iconic industrial design philosophy, less but better, to corporate operational architecture.
Exactly. I mean, Bond operates at the absolute frontier of digital physical integration. He deals with latency in the milliseconds for robotic assemblies.
Right.
But when he looks at the mundane, everyday reality of corporate operations, he just sees this catastrophic failure in basic infrastructure.
He sees organizations trying to run these hyper-complex, dynamic physical operations using, essentially, the digital equivalent of stone tablets.
Yeah. And the core of the problem here isn't a lack of investment. I mean, that's the crazy part.
No, not at all. We are talking about organizations that spend literally tens of millions of dollars on enterprise software.
Right. Think of these massive enterprise environments like a sprawling, state-of-the-art highway system. Right.
Okay, let's unpack this analogy. So a company buys a comprehensive ERP platform, a cutting-edge logistical tracker, and a top-tier CRM.
Yeah, they build these massive, multi-lane digital superhighways. And they're expecting this seamless flow of commerce and data.
And if you are an executive sitting up in the C-suite looking at your synthesized performance dashboard, you're seeing this highway from 30,000 feet up.
Exactly. The metrics glow green, the traffic appears to be flowing just fine.
But then you zoom into the ground level and you realize that these really expensive superhighways don't actually connect.
Right. They just terminate abruptly.
Right.
At these massive ravines.
Yeah, and that ravine is basically the incompatibility between these purchase systems, right? System A just cannot natively talk to System B.
It can't. System A can't push a webhook payload to System B without some custom-built multi-year IT integration project.
Which, let's be real, gets completely mired in corporate governance and never actually deploys.
Exactly. So how does the business survive in the meantime? How does the cargo actually get across that digital ravine?
Well, the workers on the ground have to get out of their cars, pick up the cargo, and physically carry it across like a makeshift rope bridge.
Yes, they build a shadow network, just out of pure necessity.
They're exporting static CSV files from System A, opening them up in local workbooks, manually copying the cells they need, and then pasting them into the UI of System B.
Right. And this highlights the execution fatigue disconnect that Catalogent discusses in their research.
Yeah, because when targets are missed, the C-suite looks at that gleaming, sanitized dashboard and sees no structural flaws in the highway system they just bought.
So they naturally conclude the problem must be the drivers. They cite execution fatigue.
They assume the workforce isn't aligned with the strategic vision, or, they just aren't pushing hard enough.
But whether you're looking at a maritime port handling 20,000 containers a day or a regional hospital ward managing patient logistics, the reality is the same.
The frontline workers are totally exhausted because they are the ones physically carrying the data across those ravines.
Exactly. And Prasad Bond illustrates the sheer absurdity of this contrast so perfectly in his technical briefs.
Oh, yeah, the story about his uncle.
Yes. So Bond spends his days modeling edge AI architectures where robotic arms make real-time autonomous decisions based on sensor telemetry, right?
Not literal split-second robotic precision.
But then his uncle, who is a senior manager at a logistics firm, still calls him on the weekend in a total panic.
Because he needs help recovering an unsaved Excel workbook that corrupted?
Yeah, corrupted while trying to process some 50-megabyte data dump. I mean, we expect life-saving high-velocity precision from global operators.
But we force them to use static, localized tools that were designed for, like, rudimentary accounting.
Exactly. It's a massive disconnect.
Okay, so I get the mechanics of the shadow network, but I'm struggling with the executive visibility piece here.
How so?
If that logistics manager makes a paste error and the container sits idle, why doesn't that immediately show up as a giant red flag on the executive dashboard?
Right.
I mean, if the ground truth is a stalled supply chain, isn't the dashboard fundamentally lying to the company if it still shows green?
What's fascinating here is that it isn't lying in the sense of being miscoded. It's suffering from severe data latency.
Data latency. Okay, break that down for me.
The dashboard is rendering a truth that might literally be a week old because the data has to be manually translated by a human being.
Right. It has to be exported, cleaned, copied, pasted, formatted, re-uploaded.
Exactly. There is an inherent structural delay built into the process. Catalogent emphasizes this strongly. A bottleneck isn't always a slow machine. It's a control point where data or accountability does not move at the speed the business actually requires.
So the executive is essentially looking at the ghost of a metric.
Yes, exactly, a ghost metric. By the time that manual spreadsheet merge is finally completed on a Friday afternoon and uploaded to feed the dashboard, it's too late.
The opportunity to reallocate capital or shift resources or go fix the physical problem on the docks has just completely evaporated.
Right, which naturally introduces the human toll of this latency. We're using human beings, people with immense analytical potential.
Yeah, deep domain expertise, complex problem-solving skills.
And we use them to bridge a software gap. Bond puts it really bluntly. We buy technology to empower people, but we end up using people to patch broken technology.
We turn them into literal human APIs. That is such a striking phrase.
It really is. It's a staggering misallocation of human capital. I mean, an API is meant to be an invisible, automated intermediary, right?
Right. A machine talking to a machine.
But when enterprise architecture lacks those endpoints, we mandate that project managers, supply chain analysts, clinical coordinators, they have to act as the integration layer.
We basically demand they bridge the gap using their own cognitive load. Which, if you think about your own job right now, you listening, how much of your week is spent just moving data from one system to another so a chart looks right?
It's a huge problem.
Yeah.
And let's examine that cognitive load because Capsule's CRM's research on employee burnout maps directly onto this.
Yeah, they say operator cognitive load is absolutely maximized by this redundant data entry.
Right. Imagine the physiological stress of a Friday afternoon data merge. You're sitting there with two monitors.
Okay, I'm picturing it.
On the left, you've got this aging inventory UI that times out every 10 minutes. On the right, a dense 60-column spreadsheet you just exported from the CRM.
And you are manually executing VL OCUPs, hunting for trailing spaces that break your formulas, just sweating over whether you copied the right alphanumeric tracking code.
Because you know that a single slip of the mouse, one misaligned row, could literally route a multi-million-dollar shipment to the wrong continent.
That is just, the anxiety of that is insane. And this is where applying Dieter Rams's philosophy of less but better transitions from being like an aesthetic choice to a real operational imperative.
Exactly. Good design fundamentally respects the user. Forcing a human being to operate as a webhook is the ultimate disrespect of their cognitive capacity.
Totally. And Capsule CRM highlights a few specific archetypes that are born from this failure. The first one they talk about is the email abyss.
Oh, the email abyss is brutal. Consider that logistics manager whose inbox is just this fragmented battlefield.
Supplier delay notifications, customer inquiries, automated system alerts that don't actually trigger any downstream actions.
Right. Finding the actual actionable data in there isn't a process. It's a frantic archaeological dig.
And then Capsule CRM also points to what they call the overworked jack of all trades.
Yes. This is the brilliant supply chain analyst or the highly trained clinical specialist who's forced to spend like 40% of their week acting as a manual data entry clerk.
Because the clinical software won't talk to the billing software. You spread a specialist that thin, burying them in repetitive administrative friction, and it leads directly to the bottleneck.
Exactly. They cannot perform the high-leverage analytical work they were actually hired to do.
And the financial ramifications of what Capsule CRM calls spreadsheet madness are just, they're huge. It's twofold, right?
First, you have the immediate capital loss caused by the time delay itself. While the coordinator is spending 3 hours merging files, the physical assets are immobilized.
Trucks are idling, burning fuel, ships are taking up expensive berth space.
And second, there's the reputational and liability cost of the inevitable human error. We're taking the entire systemic risk of a fractured digital architecture and putting it squarely on the shoulders of the frontline worker.
Yeah. When the wrong goods go to the wrong port, the organization rarely blames the lack of an API. They blame the coordinator who pasted the wrong cell.
Which just completely destroys operator morale. Think about the psychological impact of that.
You get hired for your strategic intellect only to spend your days doing this anxiety-inducing copy-pasting. You are mentally drained by Friday at 5 p.m.
And yet you haven't actually produced any net new value. You've literally just reformatted data so a machine can parse it.
It is the definition of soul-crushing work. But, okay, this brings us to a really crucial paradox in organizational behavior that we have to talk about.
The resistance to fixing it.
Right. If these shadow networks and manual spreadsheets are so miserable to maintain, if they maximize cognitive load and ruin morale, why do they persist?
It's a great question.
Why do middle managers, the regional directors, the PMO leads, why do they actively protect these inefficient spreadsheets?
Well, this is the grab mentality that Bond discusses in his research, and it does seem totally counterintuitive at first glance.
Yeah, I mean, if I'm a manager and I have to spend 10 hours a week wrestling with a brittle Excel file, you would think I'd be begging for an automated integration.
You would think so.
Huh.
But the sources indicate that department heads actually hoard this data. They build these localized spreadsheets as defensive moats.
As a security blanket, basically.
They do. And it stems from a deeply ingrained need for psychological safety. We operate in these high-blame corporate cultures where executives demand absolute perfection and zero variance.
But they provide fractured, incompatible tools to achieve that perfection.
Exactly. So in that environment, the localized spreadsheet acts as a shield against executive scrutiny.
But wait, here's where it gets really interesting for me. If that spreadsheet is prone to manual error, isn't the manager taking on significantly more personal risk?
How do you mean?
Well, if an internal audit discovers that the PMO lead has been running a shadow network that misreported inventory levels for 6 months, that manager is getting fired. Why take that localized risk?
Because the localized risk of a future audit is preferable to the immediate daily risk of an automated system flagging every single operational delay directly to the C-suite.
Oh, wow. Okay, that makes sad sense.
Right. Consider the mechanics of it. If the manager controls the spreadsheet, they control the narrative. They know the file's quirks.
So if a key supplier is 2 days late delivering a component, but the manager knows they can make up the time in the assembly phase next week, they just manually adjust the spreadsheet.
Exactly. They keep the dashboard green. They insulate their team from some reactionary executive demanding explanations for a minor delay. The shadow network is literally a mechanism for survival.
So if a digital transformation consultant parachutes in, maps the process, and says, "Great news, we're deleting your Excel files tomorrow and fully automating this pipeline," the team is going to panic.
They're going to panic and resist every single step of the way.
Oh.
Because you just stripped away their only leverage and their only shield without fixing the underlying blame culture.
You ripped away the blanket without fixing the cold room.
Precisely. And this is the absolute core of Bond's concept of restorative engineering.
Restorative engineering.
Yeah. Technology must restore human safety, capability, and dignity. If you automate a shadow network without providing a superior, structurally safe architecture, you haven't solved the problem.
You've just decentralized the anxiety.
Exactly. You have to address the control point owner with deep empathy. You have to prove that the new architecture will protect them better than their spreadsheet ever could.
Which requires shifting the entire management paradigm away from those lagging, static dashboards.
Right.
We need to introduce Dieter Ram's philosophy of structural visibility. Catalogen actually argues that structural visibility is infinitely more valuable than an executive dashboard showing green metrics.
It is.
But what does that actually mean in practice? Like, how does an industrial design principle like less but better translate to enterprise data architecture?
Well, Rams advocated for stripping a product down to its absolute functional essence, right?
Right. No extra buttons, no useless features.
Exactly. Applied to data architecture, it means eliminating the performative layers of reporting and hard-coding the actual mechanics of the work right into the system.
So a dashboard is static. It just tells you the score after the quarter is already over.
Right. But structural visibility tells you exactly how the game is being played right now, in real time. It means cross-functional dependencies are physically mapped and hard-coded into the workflow.
Instead of relying on tribal knowledge.
Exactly, instead of tribal knowledge.
And tribal knowledge being, the undocumented, informal rules of an organization, like the idea that to get a maritime manifest approved, you have to email Sarah in compliance.
Right, but only after Bob in risk assessment signs off.
Exactly.
Sure.
And if Bob is out on a Friday, you have to Slack David, but David only responds to highly specific formatted PDFs.
Yeah, we've all been there.
Okay.
None of this is documented in the software. It's literally just the oral history of the department.
Right. And Catalogen points out the fatal flaw of tribal knowledge here. It cannot scale and it cannot be automated.
It can't. If Bob is on vacation and Sarah is swamped, the manifest just sits in an inbox for a week.
And because the dependency wasn't hard-coded, the system doesn't even know it's delayed. The dashboard still looks green until a human manually updates the status spreadsheet a week later.
Exactly. By the time that missed milestone is finally reported in a retrospective meeting, the delay is catastrophic. The opportunity is gone.
So the strategy here is to convert dashboard owners into structural architects.
Yes.
So a dashboard owner looks at the data after the execution and asks, did we hit the target? How does a structural architect behave differently?
A structural architect builds the model where the execution data, the decision rights, and the value evidence are designed into the workflow before a single action is ever taken.
Okay, so Catalogen outlines a specific methodology here, right?
They do. You map the work from the initial request through all the decision nodes to execution and finally to closure.
You explicitly name the owner for every single handoff.
Right. You define the exact binary approval path. You set strict evidence requirements for a task to be marked complete. You basically just remove the ambiguity that breeds shadow networks in the first place.
So what does this all mean for the weekly status meeting? Does this philosophy kill the traditional check-in?
You cancel it.
Just entirely?
Entirely. The explicit goal of Bond's architecture is the total elimination of alignment meetings.
I mean, I am fully on board with canceling status meetings where 15 people sit around a conference table for an hour and verbally read their spreadsheets out loud.
Right, because if your system possesses genuine structural visibility, you do not need highly paid human beings to sit in a room and performatively recite data that a machine should already know.
But we have to address the executive anxiety that creates those meetings in the first place. Executives demand those check-ins because they feel disconnected from the ground truth.
Right, they want to feel in control.
Exactly. So if we kill the meeting, how do we design a reporting rhythm that actually drives faster, better decisions without dragging everyone into a conference room?
This is where we have to analyze data latency versus manual reporting speed.
Okay.
A manual report is inherently slow to create, which means it can only be generated periodically, say, every Friday afternoon or at the end of the month.
Right, and the executive gets this massive comprehensive deck, but the data is already a week old.
Exactly. Catalogen argues that a reporting cadence must be designed around decision-making, not data entry. If leadership is asking for a report merely to observe the data, the system has failed.
The system should just present the data automatically. A human should only be required to report when a decision is blocked.
Yes, and Catalogen has this fascinating breakdown of how these rhythms should function. They state that weekly reviews should never be about reading the status of every ongoing task.
Right, they should focus exclusively on blockers, owner actions, and near-term risks.
Exactly. And then monthly reviews shift to value movement, budget variance, dependency escalation. Steering committees should only ever be presented with items that require a strict go or no-go decision.
And this addresses the reporting overload that generates shadow network in the first place. Catalogen notes that if every single weekly update requires a worker to fill out 50 different fields across multiple vectors, they're going to treat reporting as a hostile administrative burden.
Absolutely. They will just copy-paste last week's data, change the date, and hit submit. But if the system only requests the specific minimal data required to unblock a node, it respects the user.
Which aligns perfectly with Bond's push for binary data systems and asynchronous text proofs. His methodology just strips away all corporate fluff.
Oh, completely. No 50-slide PowerPoint decks about paradigm shifts.
Yeah.
He demands reliance on binary data. Is the node blocked? Yes or no?
And if yes, the control point owner submits a maximum 150-word asynchronous text brief identifying the exact system blockage.
Right. And that brief is purely mechanical. Like, System A is blocked because component B from supplier C failed quality assurance testing. Estimated resolution is 48 hours.
That brief triggers an asynchronous alert to the executive, and the executive is asked for a binary approval decision based on predefined parameters. Approve expedited shipping funds. Yes or no?
Exactly. Keep it simple.
But I have to ask about enforcing that 150-word limit. In corporate environments, people love to obscure failure behind context.
Oh, they do?
They want to write 5 paragraphs explaining why it wasn't their fault that component B failed QA. How do you force a manager to communicate in a 150-word binary framework?
You enforce it architecturally.
Yeah.
The text field in the UI literally does not accept more than 150 words.
Wow, just hard cutoff.
Yeah. You remove the capacity for narrative obfuscation. You force them to distill the problem to its structural essence. Dita Ram's less but better applied to corporate communication.
I love that. But if we connect this to the bigger picture, this asynchronous nirvana where we replace meetings with binary text briefs, it's utterly impossible if the underlying plumbing is still broken.
Yes, exactly.
If the logistics coordinator still has to manually type that 150-word brief into the CRM, the ERP, and the localized spreadsheet, the brief just becomes another form of manual data entry.
Right. The duct tape is still holding the engine together. We've just standardized the color of the tape.
Exactly. So to actually fix the trillion-dollar blind spot, we have to build the bridges, we have to rip out the manual file merges.
And this leads us to the most practical, actionable segment of the deep dive, the 48-hour protocol and low-code architecture.
Yes, let's get into this. This is Prasad Bond's blueprint for restorative engineering.
Right. He provides a highly specific, parameterized guide for building low-code webhooks between disparate, incompatible enterprise systems.
The objective is to replace the shadow networks entirely, and the constraint, which is wild, is that you must prove the concept within 48 hours.
Yes. 48 hours.
I love that 48-hour constraint. It completely bypasses the traditional IT procurement cycle. We aren't drafting a 6-month scoping document for $1 million native API build.
No, we are forcing a functional bridge in 2 days.
Okay, so let's walk through the 4 steps. Step 1 is map, or what Han calls the cell map test.
Right. And the first step requires zero code. It is purely observational and really rooted in empathy. You must physically or digitally sit with the operator and observe their workflow.
Identify the exact cells they're manually copying, like if they are moving data from the legacy inventory UI to the modern CRM, which 5 specific data points are they transcribing?
Exactly. You have to map the exact point of friction. Because if you don't map the cells, you run the risk of automating the wrong thing.
We're breaking the psychological safety net we discussed earlier.
Right. You must understand why they are copying those specific cells before you attempt to disrupt the process.
So once you have mapped the exact data requirements, you move to step 2, bridge. And this is where you deploy a low-code automated webhook.
Yeah. Let's define the mechanics of that webhook. For a non-technical manager listening to this, a webhook isn't some incomprehensible black magic.
Oh, right. It's essentially a lightweight automated trigger. It's an if this, then that statement running in the background.
Exactly. It says when a new shipping manifest is generated in System A, instantly grab the payload, just those 5 specific cells we mapped, and p-post it to the endpoint in System B.
And we use low-code platforms to do this. We don't need a team of senior back-end developers writing custom C# integrations.
No. Modern low-code environments allow a structural architect to visually script these connections, mapping the JSON payload from one system to the schema of the other. It is minimalist.
It bridges only what is functionally essential. Less, but better.
Exactly.
I buy the theory, but let's introduce some real-world friction here. The reality of enterprise software is that it's messy. Sometimes, System A is a monolithic legacy mainframe deployed in 1998.
Oh, absolutely.
It does not have modern REST API endpoints. It violently resists webhooks. If a webhook can't authenticate, does the 48-hour protocol just fail? Do we give up and go back to copying and pasting?
Absolutely not. And this is where Bond's deep tech pragmatism really shines in step 3, extract.
Okay, what's extract?
If the legacy system refuses a webhook, you utilize code-based extraction logic. You deploy a basic parsing script. Let's walk through the architecture of this.
Sure.
The legacy system might be too old to send a webhook, but almost every legacy system on Earth can run a scheduled batch export of a CSV file to a designated local folder or secure FTP site.
Okay, so the system drops a dense, raw CSV dump into a folder every hour?
Right. Previously, a human would have to open that folder, open the massive CSV, find the relevant rows, copy them, and paste them into System B.
Right, the Friday afternoon nightmare.
Exactly. Under the extraction protocol, you deploy a lightweight Python or Node.js parsing script. This script runs a simple cron job, constantly watching that specific directory.
So the millisecond the legacy system drops the CSV into the folder, the script wakes up?
Yes, it reads the file headers, validates the data types, extracts only the 5 map cells, structures them into a JSON payload, and automatically pushes them into System B's database.
Let's compare those two architectures directly, because the difference in operational efficiency is just staggering.
It's night and day.
The manual file merge requires an operator to dedicate an hour of intense cognitive load, fighting eye strain and UI latency, risking a multi-million-dollar routing error with every keystroke.
Right. Well, the automated asynchronous extraction protocol utilizes a script that reads the file in milliseconds.
It parses the exact data perfectly every single time and updates the target system without a human ever looking at a spreadsheet.
And the human operator is finally freed from being an API.
But this introduces a critical governance question, which leads to step 4, alert.
Right.
If a human isn't manually checking the data transfer every day, how do we know the parsing script hasn't silently failed? How do we ensure we aren't flying blind?
Because if the script breaks and no one notices for a week, the shadow network was actually safer.
Exactly.
So step 4 mandates that you build asynchronous alerts right into the logic. You configure the script so that if a data mismatch occurs, for example, if it expects an integer but reads a string,
Or if the legacy system fails to drop a file into the folder for a delta exceeding 24 hours?
right, the script triggers an immediate automated alert to a dedicated channel, say
Okay.
a specific Slack or Microsoft Teams channel. The operator only interacts with the system when the system explicitly asks for help.
Now, I want to challenge one of the technical parameters Pond sets for this entire protocol because it seems borderline impossible.
The latency rule.
Yeah. He states that the system, whether it's the webhook or the parsing script, must execute in under 200 milliseconds, and that digital assemblies should be restricted to minimal moving parts. Wait, under 200 milliseconds. So we are taking a process that used to drain a human's entire Friday afternoon and reducing it to a blink of an eye. Why 200 milliseconds? I mean, if the manual process used to take hours, wouldn't an automated script that takes 5 minutes still be a massive victory? Why enforce such extreme boundary conditions?
Because the 200 millisecond parameter is a forcing function for structural clarity. It is the digital embodiment of Dieter Rams' philosophy.
Okay, explain that.
If you allow a script to take 5 minutes to execute, you allow for bloated code. You allow for unnecessary database queries, redundant validation loops, and complex, fragile dependencies. By demanding execution in under 200 milliseconds, you force the structural architect to simplify the payload. You cannot move bloated data that fast. It forces you to rely exclusively on transparent, binary data.
It strips away all the tribal knowledge and the legacy cruft.
Exactly. It's parameter engineering. The strict constraint generates a cleaner, safer, more resilient design.
And Blon offers actionable validation signals to prove the architecture works, right?
He does. Once you deploy the webhook or the parsing script, you run a test transaction. You track the latency. If the alert fires within 1 minute of a simulated file failure, the validation is complete.
The system is functional and structurally sound.
Right. You can then demand that the control point owner respond to that asynchronous alert with a binary decision. If they do, you have successfully shifted the culture from a reactive, manual reporting factory to a proactive, decision-driven operation.
It is a profound operational shift. We are moving from a culture that manages the anxiety of broken software through manual labor to a culture that structurally engineers the friction out of existence.
Well said.
Let's summarize the immense ground we've covered today. We started by looking at the illusion of the executive dashboard, contrasting that glowing green interface with the ground-level reality of frontline gridlock.
Right. And we unpacked the tragedy of the human API, detailing how cognitive load and redundant data entry create the email abyss and burn out our most talented specialists.
We then explored the hidden psychology behind this gridlock, understanding that middle management protects these shadow networks out of a desperate need for psychological safety within high-blame corporate cultures.
Which is huge. And we applied Dieter Rams's minimalist philosophy to demonstrate why structural visibility, hard-coding dependencies, and decision rights is vastly superior to static, lagging metrics.
We analyzed how that structural visibility allows us to redefine our reporting rhythms, completely canceling performative status meetings in favor of 150-word asynchronous text briefs and binary executive decisions.
And finally, we detailed the 48-hour protocol, mapped the exact point of friction, bridge the gap with low-code webhooks.
Extract data via parsing scripts if legacy software resists, and alert asynchronously, all strictly engineered to execute in under 200 milliseconds.
It really is a comprehensive blueprint for dismantling the trillion-dollar blind spot. It prioritizes functional clarity, removes administrative friction, and restores the analytical potential that is currently trapped beneath layers of spreadsheet madness.
And this brings us directly to you, the listener, because you do not need a C-suite title or a massive IT budget to initiate this transformation.
No, you don't. You can be the quiet architect within your own department. The power to identify friction, to map the manual cells, and to deploy these low-code bridges is accessible to you right now.
You have the tools to restore dignity to your own workflow. The methodologies are proven, and the low-code platforms are widely available.
It simply requires the empathy to truly observe the manual pain points of your operators and the courage to build a simpler, safer architecture.
So we want to leave you with a final provocative thought. It ties right back to that duct tape engine holding the shiny digital highway together.
Right.
The next time you are asked in a meeting to update the master tracker or to spend your Friday afternoon consolidating a massive CSV file, ask yourself a fundamental question.
Are you doing your actual job?
Exactly. Are you utilizing the intellect, the domain expertise, and the strategic thinking you were hired for? Or are you simply acting as a human webhook, manually patching the plumbing of a broken machine? And if you realize it's the latter, what are you going to build tomorrow to automate that request completely out of existence?